A beetle taps at a closed window. Inside, a woman has just described a dream of a golden scarab. Carl Jung opens the window, catches the insect mid-air, and places it in her hand. In that single moment, her entire psychology collapses and is born again. This is synchronicity. Meaningful coincidence. The secret architecture of reality. Synchronicity, Jung wrote, takes the coincidence of events in space and time as meaning something more than mere chance. You have felt it. You may have no name for it, but you have felt it. The call from the person you were just thinking about. The book that fell open at exactly the passage you needed. We file these under coincidence, and we move on. But what if they are something else? From his earliest years, Carl Jung lived close to phenomena that science could not name. He saw things. He heard things. He sensed the boundary between mind and matter thinning in ways that troubled him deeply. He feared, at times, that he was going mad. And yet he refused to look away. He turned toward the strangeness and asked the question that would define his life. What does it mean? In one of his most haunting visions, just before the outbreak of the First World War, Jung saw yellow waves, floating rubble, and the death of countless thousands. The image returned weeks later, more violent than before, and an inner voice spoke, "Look at it. It is completely real, and it will come to pass. You cannot doubt this." When the war began, Jung understood. What he had experienced was not madness. It was a glimpse into something deeper, what he would later call the collective unconscious, the substratum of the psyche shared by all humanity. The question pressed itself on him: how are such meaningful events, events not linked by any apparent chain of cause and effect, possible? These were juxtapositions that scientific rationality could not explain, and yet they happened, again and again, with a regularity that demanded a name. As a youth, Jung experienced not only unusual visions, but events that resisted any rational interpretation. During the summer holidays, while studying his textbooks, he heard a sound like a pistol shot. He rushed into the room and found that a solid wooden table had split from the rim to beyond the center. Some 2 weeks later, he heard another report. This time, inside a cupboard, the bread knife, used only a short while before, had snapped into several pieces. Wood and steel were not supposed to behave this way. And yet, they had. These were the first hairline fractures in the rational world of a young scientist. Through those cracks, something else was beginning to show itself. Jung finished his medical studies and became a psychiatrist. He attended seances for communicating with the dead and developed an enduring interest in parapsychology and the occult, driven, above all, by his own experiences. This formed the basis of his medical dissertation, published in 1902, on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomena. But the most famous early example of synchronicity in Jung's life would occur in a room in Vienna, in the company of the man who, for a time, he considered his spiritual father. The two of them were discussing parapsychology. Sigmund Freud, in his rigid materialism, dismissed Jung's questions as nonsensical. Jung felt a strange sensation, as if his diaphragm were made of iron and were becoming red hot. At that very moment, a loud detonation came from the bookcase beside them, so violent that both men stood up in alarm. Jung turned to Freud and said, that is an example of so-called catalytic exteriorization phenomenon. Freud replied that it was sheer bosh. Jung insisted it was not, and to prove his point, he predicted that in a moment another such report would occur. Another detonation went off in the bookcase. Jung later wrote, "To this day I do not know what gave me this certainty. But I knew beyond all doubt that the report would come again. Freud only stared aghast at me. Something had spoken through the wood. In that moment, the seed of an idea was planted in Jung that would take him the rest of his life to articulate. The seed needed water, and the water came from the East. In 1928, while Jung was painting the mandalas that would fill his Red Book, the sinologist Richard Wilhelm sent him a copy of The Secret of the Golden Flower, a Taoist alchemical treatise teaching an ancient Chinese meditation practice for achieving wholeness. Jung was astonished by the parallelism between the Chinese mandala described in the text and the very mandala he was painting at that moment. He devoured the book. Beneath his own mandala he inscribed, in 1928, when I was painting this picture, showing the golden, well-fortified castle, Richard Wilhelm in Frankfurt sent me the 1,000-year-old Chinese text on the yellow castle, the germ of the immortal body. This was the turning point. From this moment, Jung's writings shifted toward the psychological significance of alchemy. He wrote of Wilhelm, the spark leapt across and kindled a light that was to become for me one of the most significant events of my life. It was in this period that Jung coined the term synchronicity. He spoke of it publicly for the first time in 1930 in his memorial address for Richard Wilhelm. He defined it as a peculiar principle active in the world, so that things happen together somehow and behave as if they were the same, and yet, for us, they are not. Jung equated synchronicity with the Chinese concept of Tao, the union of opposites represented by the complementary pairs of yin and yang. It is grounded in the oneness of the human being and the surrounding cosmos. It is akin to the alchemical credo, as above, so below. The inner world and the outer world, the psyche and matter, are one and the same. This is the goal of Jungian psychology, the balance of opposites, the alignment of the ego with the self as the true center of the personality. And here, synchronicity plays a vital role. It is the language the universe uses to tell you that you are on the right path, or sometimes that you are on the wrong one. There is no linear evolution for individuation. There is only what Jung called circumambulation, a circling around, a movement in which everything is related to the center. This is represented by the mandala, a visual image of the divine pattern, a manifestation of the self. The end result is what the alchemists called mysterium coniunctionis, the sacred marriage. The opposite sides of life are united in a holy union. Tman, Tao, and Christ, Jung remarked, are different cultural symbols for the same wholeness. It is no longer you who live. It lives you. The oracle of the I Ching played a central role in the development of Jung's idea. He used it with his patients in psychotherapy and could recall a great many meaningful insights. He once described the case of a patient suffering from a mother complex who feared his prospective marriage partner might be domineering. Jung consulted the I Ching, and it produced the hexagram 44, entitled Coming to Meet, which stated, "The maiden is powerful. One should not marry such a maiden." To understand what Jung meant, we have to separate two ideas we usually confuse. Causality is the way we explain the link between two successive events. The cause of striking a billiard ball with a cue leads to the effect of the ball moving. One thing happens, and because of it, another thing happens. This is the world the modern mind takes for granted. Synchronicity is something else entirely. It is a meaningful coincidence of outer and inner events that cannot be causally linked. The emphasis lies on the word meaningful. It occurs when an inwardly perceived event, a dream, a vision, a premonition, a thought, or a mood, is found to have a precise correspondence in external reality. The inner image has come true. The inner world and the outer world coincide. And in that coincidence, meaning is born. The word derives from the Greek prefix syn, meaning together, and chronos, meaning time. A synchronicity is not an ordinary coincidence. It is a meaningful coincidence of two or more events. The problem puzzled Jung for decades. As he investigated the collective unconscious, he kept encountering coincidences connected so meaningfully that they broke all statistical probabilities. We cannot easily imagine events that are connected non-causally. But the inability to imagine something does not mean that it does not exist. This is the trap of the modern mind. We confuse the limits of our imagination with the limits of reality. Jung was not alone in this rebellion. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, sought therapy from Carl Jung and shared with him a great many of his dreams. A prominent quantum physicist who happened to dream complex symbolic dreams was an extraordinary find. After Pauli was no longer formally a patient, he continued his correspondence with Jung, documented in the volume Atom and Archetype. Through their joint effort, they came to see synchronicity as a causal principle that transcends space, time, and causality. In 1952, they published The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche. Jung's contribution, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, was later published in Volume 8 of his collected works. He wrote, "In most cases they were things which people do not talk about for fear of exposing themselves to thoughtless ridicule. I was amazed to see how many people have had experiences of this kind and how carefully the secret was guarded. Carefully guarded. That phrase should stop us. Because if you have ever had such an experience, and statistically you have, you understand exactly why. We do not speak of these things. We bury them, we laugh at them in public, and replay them in silence." Jung's gift was permission. Permission to take seriously what we already know. Jung referred to the work of J.B. Rhine, who founded parapsychology as a branch of psychology. Rhine's experiments demonstrated evidence for a causal combinations of events, chance concurrences whose improbability would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure. In one card experiment, one young man, who in numerous trials scored an average of 10 hits for every 25 cards, double the probable number, once guessed all 25 cards correctly. The probability of such a result is roughly 1 in 298 quadrillion. Numbers like that are not coincidence, they are something that has not yet been named. To name it, Jung turned to his deepest concept, the archetype. Archetypes are patterns of instinctual behavior responsible for the organization of unconscious psychic processes. They constitute the structure of the collective unconscious, which represents a psyche identical in all individuals and contains the images of all creation. It is the master pattern of life. The archetypes arrange psychic material and produce meaningful patterns in the physical world. Imagine iron filings scattered on a sheet of paper. They look like chaos. Then a magnet is placed beneath the paper, and instantly the filings arrange themselves into a clean, lawful pattern. You cannot see the magnet, you only see its effect. This is what the archetype does to events in our lives. It is the magnet beneath the paper. They cannot be directly perceived. Because of this irrepresentable nature, Jung called the archetype psychoid, soul-like, referring to the relationship between a person's psyche and the physical world beyond that person's body. We find ourselves with a factor that has nothing to do with brain activity, but rather with meaningful patterns in our personal lives. Meaningful coincidences rest on an archetypal foundation. Synchronicity is the deepest layer of archetypal reality, where psyche and matter collide and become indistinguishable. This unitary dimension to all experience is the alchemical notion of the unus mundus, the one world. As Jung wrote, if mandala symbolism is the psychological equivalent of the unus mundus, then synchronicity is its parapsychological equivalent. The fullness of the self is the pleroma, the place where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. It is the idea that everything that will happen has already happened. That is the magic of synchronicity. But theory without example is a closed door. Jung knew this. He left us a series of stories that open that door for the rest of us. The first comes from outside his own life. The 19th century French poet Miles Deschamps was, as a boy, given a piece of plum pudding by a man named Monsieur de Forquebus. 10 years later, Deschamps discovered another plum pudding in a Paris restaurant and asked if he could have a piece. It had already been ordered by de Forquebus. Many years afterwards, Deschamps was invited to partake of a plum pudding as a special rarity. While he was eating it, he remarked that the only thing missing was de Forquebus. At that moment, the door opened, and an old man in the last stages of disorientation walked in. It was de Forquebus, who had got hold of the wrong address and had burst in on the party by mistake. A coincidence of this magnitude is something the rational mind does not know what to do with. We laugh, we retell the story, and then we forget it, because to truly take it seriously is to admit that something about our model of the world is incomplete. Jung himself recorded a similar series. On the 1st of April 1949, he made a note in the morning of an inscription containing a figure that was half man and half fish. There was fish for lunch. Someone mentioned the custom of making an April fish of someone. In the afternoon, a former patient showed him impressive pictures of fish. In the evening, he was shown a piece of embroidery with sea monsters and fishes. The next morning, a former patient he had not seen in 10 years visited him. She had dreamed of a large fish the night before. Months later, when Jung was writing the series down, he walked to a spot by the lake in front of his house. A fish a foot long lay on the seawall. Since no one else was present, he had no idea how it had got there. When coincidences pile up in this way, one cannot help being impressed. And yet, Jung remained cautious. He had his doubts about whether the fish series truly constituted a synchronicity, for there was no clear interaction with the inner world. This caution matters, because synchronicity, more than almost any other idea in Jungian psychology, can be misused. Jung warned that synchronicity can be misinterpreted in a pathological way. To see meaning everywhere is not wisdom, it is illness. He had observed this especially in patients with schizophrenia, who interpret events as having a special and exclusive reference to themselves. He wrote, "The schizophrenic's interpretation is morbidly narrow because it is mostly restricted to the intentions of other people and to his own ego importance." The difference between the mystic and the madman lies precisely here. The mystic listens to the symbol. The madman is consumed by it. With that warning held firmly in mind, we can return to the stories. On one occasion, Jung and the members of a seminar he was conducting on dream analysis were discussing the symbol of the bull god in relation to the dream of an analysand. Unaware of the seminar's discussions, the analysand spent those very same days making a painting of a bull with the disk of the sun between its horns. On another occasion, Jung wrote, "I walk with a woman patient in a wood. She tells me about the first dream in her life that had made an everlasting impression upon her. She had seen a spectral fox coming down the stairs in her parental home. At this moment, a real fox comes out of the trees not 40 yards away and walks quietly on the path ahead of us for several minutes. The animal behaves as if it were a partner in the human situation." Notice what is happening here. The animal does not appear as a thing among things. It appears as a partner. For a moment, there is only one world. Jung also recounted the story of a student friend whose father had promised him a trip to Spain if he passed his examinations. The friend dreamed that he was walking through a Spanish city. The street led to a square where there stood a Gothic cathedral. He then turned right, around a corner, into another street. There he was met by an elegant carriage drawn by two cream-coloured horses. Then he woke up. Shortly afterward, having passed his examinations, he went to Spain. In one of its streets, he recognized the city of his dream. He found the square and the cathedral. He wanted to walk straight to it, but then he remembered that in the dream he had turned right. Hardly had he turned the corner when he saw, in reality, the carriage with the two cream-coloured horses. For Jung, the sentiment of déjà vu is grounded in a foreknowledge present in dreams. In such cases, chance becomes highly improbable because the coincidence is known in advance. But not all synchronicities are gentle. Some arrive carrying the weight of life and death. Jung tells the story of a patient whom he had once pulled out of a deep depression. The patient's wife placed a tremendous burden upon him. After a year of marriage, he fell into a new depression. Jung urged him to come and visit, but due to the influence of his wife, the patient never replied. At that time, Jung returned to his hotel at midnight after lecturing. He wrote, "At about 2 o'clock, I must have just fallen asleep. I awoke with a start and had the feeling that someone had come into the room. I instantly turned on the light, but there was nothing. Then I tried to recall exactly what had happened, and it occurred to me that I had been awakened by a feeling of dull pain, as though something had struck my forehead and then the back of my skull. The following day I received a telegram saying that my patient had committed suicide. He had shot himself. Later, I learned that the bullet had come to rest in the back wall of the skull. The unconscious had knowledge of his patient's condition. The boundary between distant souls had, for a moment, dissolved. And then there is the case that defined the concept itself. The golden scarab, an important Egyptian symbol embodying the archetype of rebirth and transformation. Jung had a difficult time with this patient who was, as he put it, psychologically inaccessible. She was extremely rational and refused to believe anything about the unconscious. Jung wrote, "A young woman I was treating had, at a critical moment, a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. While she was telling me this dream, I sat with my back to the closed window. Suddenly I heard a noise behind me, like a gentle tapping. I turned round and saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the nearest analogy to a golden scarab that one finds in our latitudes, a scarabade beetle, the common rose chafer, which, contrary to its usual habits, had evidently felt an urge to get into a dark room at this particular moment. I must admit that nothing like it ever happened to me before or since." Jung handed the creature to his patient with the words, "Here is your scarab." The experience broke the ice of her intellectual resistance. It put her in touch with her feelings, her ego died, and a new self was born. Jung offered these examples not as exhaustive proof, but as a paradigm. Synchronicities accompany the crucial phases of the process of individuation, yet far too often they pass unnoticed, because the individual has not learned to watch for such coincidences and to make them meaningful in relation to the symbolism of his inner life. This is the task Jung leaves to each of us. To watch. To wait, to take seriously the moments when the outer world seems to answer the inner one. Be on the watch for events in your life that may seem random, and see what meaning might arise if you allow them to live within you for some time. Synchronicity is a way of coming to realize what is in our deepest, undiscovered self. In 1961, Jung had just finished his final work, a contribution to Man and His Symbols entitled Approaching the Unconscious, after a dream advised him to make his ideas accessible to the general public. 3 days before his death, he had a series of dreams. He saw himself high in a high place, around a boulder of stone illuminated by the full sun. Carved into the stone were the words, take this as a symbol of the wholeness you have achieved and the singleness you have become. In another dream, he saw a square and trees growing in it. The roots of the trees were intertwined with gold, the alchemical symbol of wholeness. The collective unconscious was saying to him, "You have done your work. You have done it well, and it will grow." Just before Jung's death, his friend Lorenz van der Post, on a voyage from Africa to Europe, had a dream of Jung waving goodbye. A few hours later, nature joined in. A thunderstorm swept over Zurich, and lightning struck and destroyed one of Jung's favorite trees in the garden where he used to sit. Some years later, van der Post was filming a documentary at the Jung house in Zurich. When the moment came for him to speak directly to the camera about Jung's death, and he came to the description of how lightning had demolished Jung's favorite tree, the lightning struck in the garden again. The man who had spent his life teaching us to listen had, at the very end, become a voice in the storm. The world he had described was the world that came to claim him. The inner and the outer, finally, indistinguishable. Perhaps this is what Jung wanted us to understand all along, that we are not separate from the universe we observe, that the psyche does not end at the skin. That meaning is not something we invent to comfort ourselves, but something we discover again and again when we have the courage to look. Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see.